Because it's so abrupt and harsh, you're left reeling by this one sentence, and you have to read on so that you can try and find some sense of calm and order. Welcome back to my Write Like series. In this one I take a look at some of the techniques and styles of some of your favourite authors and figure out how they work so that you can use them too. Today we're focusing on Emily St John Mandel. I'll just say out front, I've read every novel that she's ever written and I'm a massive fan of her work. You've probably heard of her most popular book, Station 11. It's a beautifully written post-apocalyptic story. It treads the line between genre and literary really well, and it just has so much impact. I love it. It's one of my favourite books in the world. I'm also going to be looking at her newest book, The Glass Hotel, which I'm reading right now and I haven't even finished yet. I just wanted to make a video about it because so far it's great. Excuse the interruption, future Kieren here. I filmed all that stuff yesterday and at the time of filming it, that was the copy of The Glass Hotel that I had. However, there came a knock at the door yesterday afternoon and this arrived, which is a hardback signed copy that my wife had surprised me with. So if you're into book reviews, follow my wife on Instagram. She's at Shelf Life. She posts short reviews of books and really nice photos of them. I wanted to just say thanks for the really nice book. Alright, back to our regularly scheduled programming. The first technique I want to focus on is something that's present in both of these books in the early stages and really helps to grab the reader's attention. Now, as usual, I've given it a stupid name that doesn't really do it any justice whatsoever, but whatever. I'm calling it the gut punch flash forward. I read Station 11 first out of all of Emily St John Mandel's books, and it was this exact technique that made me realise in the early stages that this was going to end up as one of my favourite books. Before I show you an example, I'll explain a bit more about what I mean, about what a gut punch flash forward really is. Basically, you'll be reading a passage from this book, and you'll be very much focused in the here and now of the story. You'll be in the room while characters have a conversation, or you're watching the small, seemingly inconsequential actions that they're taking. Then she'll drop one sentence that zooms you out to this overall view of the story and what's to come in the future, and she hits you with something that you just never saw coming. Here's an example, and obviously, if you've never read Station 11, this is a very small spoiler into what happens in the story, so just be aware of that. In the lobby, the people gathered at the bar clinked their glasses together. To Arthur, they said. They drank for a few more minutes and then went their separate ways in the storm. Of all of them there at the bar that night, the bartender was the one who survived the longest. He died 3 weeks later on the road out of the city. Did you feel a gut punch? Even without much context, you can tell how this zoom out changes the course of the entire story. Brilliant. I love this technique. I think the reason that this works so well is because it's kind of jarring. It almost feels like turning a corner on a roller coaster. Not that I ride roller coasters, I'm too scared of them, but anyway. All of the narration leading up to this point is very much focused in the here and now of these characters in conversation in the lobby of a theatre. It's really well written, you can't help but feel the atmosphere, it's really immersive. She's showing, not telling, as a writer should do. But then this final line, or this final couple of lines, is different. It's actually telling. If you think about it, we're not with the bartender on the road 3 weeks later. We're just being told about it. Here's proof that telling rather than showing sometimes can have a massive impact that really works for the story. In this case, it's so jarring that the whole thing just pulls you closer to the story and increases your interest in it. Because it's so abrupt and harsh, you're left reeling by this one sentence, and you have to read on so that you can try and find some sense of calm and order. It's a fantastic technique used early on to set up a story and for inverting what your expectations of that story are. This also appears early on in the new book, The Glass Hotel, and it shocked me just as much this time. Here it is, minor spoiler alert again, obviously, and I've just taken a few passages here and fused them together because the narrative kind of jumps around a little bit in this preceding section, and I wanted to make the example clear. I've not changed the meaning or anything like that, I've just squashed some stuff together if I could be bold enough to try and edit Emily St John Mandel. But here we go, let's look at the example. "I'll see you around," he said, to all of them, but especially to her, because sometimes no thank you means not at the present moment, but maybe later. Although the pills. "Thank you," she said. After Paul walked away, Annika took one pill and gave the other two to Charlie, whose heart stopped a half hour later on the dance floor. Again, there's a flash forward and this gut punch that I just didn't see coming. We're in this focused setting in a nightclub. The small actions between the characters, so they're passing pills or they're walking away from each other, a small, seemingly inconsequential conversation between the two. Then there's this zoom out, this course-changing impact, this sudden, stark telling of what's just happened. I love this technique, this sudden, stark telling, and handled with precision and care like Emily St John Mandel does, it's really, really effective. And it's proof that there's value in both showing and telling, as long as you use them in the right ways, and they make up the right proportions of your writing. There's another technique of hers I want to talk about, and for me it's the source of what I think is some really beautiful writing. It's all about how she uses scale, and like I said with the flash forward gut punch, she has this way of zooming out to view the story in its entirety contrasted with tiny little moments. This technique highlights the tiny little lives of people living on this vast planet Earth. Here's an example from The Glass Hotel, which is all about shipping lanes, which isn't something I've really thought about much before, but here it is. There are tens of thousands of ships at sea at any given moment, and he liked to imagine each one as a point of light converging into rivers of electric brilliance over the night oceans, flowing through the narrow channels of the Suez and Panama Canals, the Strait of Gibraltar, around the edges of continents. Can you feel the scale of that and the size? It makes me feel small in a really good way, and the way she says night oceans just conjures this image so strongly into my mind. It's a brief intermission between the day-to-day lives and preoccupations of ordinary little people and the vastness of nature, and I really love that contrast. There's a comparable passage in Station 11 too. This time the scale is reversed a little. It goes from this overall view of a fleet of stranded ships down to one room and one character. This example, weirdly, is also shipping related, and I've connected a few sentences together here again that aren't exactly next to each other, but they're within a couple of pages. The effect remains the same, I've just condensed it down a little bit, so here we go. The ships were lit up to prevent collisions in the dark, and when she looked out at them, she felt stranded, the blaze of light on the horizon both filled with mystery and impossibly distant. The ships still shone on the horizon. There was still no breeze. It was morning in New York City. She imagined Clark hanging up the receiver in his office in Manhattan. Again, you can feel the scale in this. We're looking out at this horizon filled with stranded ships, and then we're zoomed right into one character putting the phone down in their office half a world away. It makes you think about the size of the planet and the distance between people and how small people's lives really are. Adding perspective like that does the story a world of good. It's so immersive and so cinematic. I love it. What I've taken away from Emily St John Mandel's writing is a reminder to use scale more. Big contrasts and zooming in and zooming out can really add a perspective to your book that wasn't there before, and it can add a little added significance to smaller events in your story. The other thing I want to try out in my own writing is to experiment a little bit more with mixing a small amount of telling into the showing that I'm doing. As long as it's in very small, targeted moments, telling can have a massive impact to how your story feels. I want to try that out and see if I can create a similar effect. Let me know in the comments if there's an author you'd like to see me cover in a future episode. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.